Page number 32 of the first block. So we have to discuss what is called communication and social change today. We have been discussing the first block in the paper BEGAE 182. And today we'll be discussing communication and social change. See, we know what communication has, how it has underwent drastic changes during all these centuries and how it has affected or how it has brought in several social changes. We need to know about them today. See, we at the beginning or when the printing press had not been invented, what people depended on or what people almost always used was oral communication and oral literature, oral forms of literature, oral communication. That was what was only possible. But with the invention of printing press, see, there has been a transition from oral to literate societies. That is, people, when books came to be printed, people are expected to know reading and writing. And they work for that. They go to schools, they learn from schools, and they work on reading and writing. So this is one change that the invention of printing press has brought into the society. See, today, there are books available in almost all forms. You can find books in PDF forms. You can find books, audio books are available, which you can just listen to, and you can see go through the whole novel in the form of audio books. But when printing press came in, people almost always enjoyed, see, their time. They passed away their time by reading out books. So books were handwritten and illustrations were there made by hand, and then people started learning to read and write, attending schools in order to make themselves comfortable with the printed books. See, we also know how, see, communication has been made possible through different equipments like CDs, DVDs, audio cassettes, video cassettes. See, and we also see today when we are discussing the paper on communication, we are using the mobile phone, we are using the laptop. See, all these are different electronic communication technologies that have been invented. See, with the discovery of all these communication technologies, what has happened? See, people have been, the distance between people has been, page number is 33, block 1. The distance between people has been reduced to a minimal. See, distance education was unimaginable during the times of our parents and grandparents. But today, see, a teacher who is not physically present is teaching you, and you are belonging to many different corners of maybe Kerala or maybe outside Kerala. So, how things are being connected, how distance is being reduced to a minimum. See, and what has happened through such easily available electronic means of communication, what has happened is the process of memorization. It has been brought to a steady decrease. See, today people no more wrote, learn things. See, what happens is when exams are there, people look into, see, all these audio clips which are available to them. They might go for finding out videos on YouTubes with regard to the topics that they have to write an exam on. See, all such things are available today to us. We do not have to memorize things. Even though we depend on them, we need to remember some of the things so that we can write it, use those points in the exam and write it in a language of our own. But the process of memorization has been brought to a steady decrease with the invention of all these electronic devices. See, and we have been turned into what is called virtual communities. See, we have been turned into what is called virtual communities with the use of webcam, with the use of chatting. We can reach across continents. We can reach any part of the world, people belonging to any part of the world, be it people in our family or people who are our friends and relatives. So such has been the changes in the society with the coming in of several communication technologies. See, and the IT field, it has also opened an entire new line of work. See, instantaneous communication links between continents are possible today. See, it is because of the computers and satellite system. So all these things are there in this particular unit, which is titled Communication and Social Change. So we are now living as virtual communities, and we exist in a reality which can be called as the virtual reality. So this is our present status or present condition. See, even though the natural calamities or the attacks of virus like corona, see, all these things have been affecting our lives, we are still able to continue living, continue talking to people around us or people who are away from us through the means of these communication technological devices. See, and then looking into the next section, which is language and the new technologies. See, there is something called rebus writing. If you have your textbook, it is in page number 36. There is something called rebus writing, which made use of homophony in English. What is homophony? I think we have already discussed homophony somewhere. Homophones are words which are having the same pronunciation, which might not look the same, which might not be spelled the same, but they are pronounced the same and have different meanings. So making use of this phenomena of homophony in language, what we do is we involve in what is called rebus writing. See, for example, today our chat language, while we chat to our friends via WhatsApp, see, what are the kind of words that we use to denote the word before? We just write BE and then the digit 4, before. That becomes before. For tomorrow, we can use the digit 2 and then morrow can be written tomorrow. So these are some of the ways in which we communicate, and this kind of a writing is called rebus writing. See, this is what we make use of while we SMS or while we chat via WhatsApp. So these inventions in communication technologies has also affected our language. See, various ways of using the same language has been discovered because of the new technologies. See, through short messaging service, which is SMS, we are reshaping written English. We are actually reshaping it. See, people always say that is being done is people are imitating, children are imitating or copying their elders. We have been saying these things. See, children always imitate or copy their elders. But today, see, what is happening is not just imitation, but actually we are reinventing the language. We are reinventing the language in the sense that using the possibilities available in the language, we are bringing in different ways in which we can communicate. Different versions of the same language can be brought in. Maybe using, one of them is maybe using the phenomenon of homophony, as I told you. For example, the word before, BE and then the digit 4 can be written in order to denote the word before. The page number is 36. See, I'm looking at the book online. It's page 36. So these are the things with regard to language and new technologies. See, with the coming in of new technologies, language has been reshaped and language is being reinvented, as people would put it. It's not just imitation or copying, but reinvention of the language, reshaping of the language. So this is the end of the second unit in block 1. We have come to an end of second unit in block 1. We'll begin with the third unit. As far as the weightage or importance given to this chapter is concerned, it gains more weightage. See, most of the time your question paper will have one question or the other from this particular unit, which is verbal and non-verbal communication. See, non-verbal and non-verbal means of communication is what we are going to discuss now, unit 3. We already know verbal communication exists in two forms or two modes, which are they are oral and written. Oral and written forms of communication, written means of communication. Most often we make use of oral communication, but when it comes to formal occasions, when it comes to areas where everything has to be jotted down, everything has to be kept as record for another occasion, for the perusal of other people, we need to use the written mode as such. So both the oral and written forms of communication are sometimes simultaneously used. So all these things are discussed in this particular unit. The first part is on verbal communication and the second is on non-verbal communication, which discusses non-verbal modes of communications such as signs, symbols, graphs, charts, flowcharts, body language, facial expressions, all these things. And the third part of the chapter of this particular unit, third unit in the first block, discusses what is called barriers to communication. We have already discussed some part of it, but we'll be discussing it in detail today. It is the third unit in block 1. If you're online, we are in page number 41. See, verbal communication has two modes, oral and written. Communication is always often understood mainly as verbal communication, but it is also non-verbal, as we shall see in the next coming section. This is what your chapter begins with. This section on verbal communication begins with. See, verbal communication is communication through words. It can have two modes, which are there, oral and written. See, oral and written communication. Oral communication is more, it's natural, it's spontaneous. And most of the time people make use of oral communication. But in formal situations, when written communication is required or when someone has to record whatever is taking place, whatever incidents are taking place, whatever decisions are being taken, what people do is people write down those things. Written communication is made use of. See, written communication is not always possible for everyone. Not everyone can communicate effectively in the written mode. See, maybe because there are psychological barriers or maybe because there is lack of technique. So effective communication, for the effective communication, we use these two modes. So verbal communication has two modes, the oral and the written. So we have just looked into what is oral communication and what is written communication. Now, which are the various areas where oral communication is made use of? See, we know when I am teaching you, when I am talking to you, I'm making use of oral communication. Oral mode is used. See, whenever personal authentication is needed, we make use of oral mode of communication. See, whenever social or gregarious needs must be met, that is, we are meeting with a stranger, a person who has just visited us. We cannot simply start writing anything. We have to talk to them then and there. So, speaking or oral communication is necessary in such situations when social or gregarious needs are to be met. See, with a team of people who are having a warm relationship and who are personally known to each other, in such a group, we make use of what is called as oral communication. Oral mode of communication is more useful in such cases. Warmth and personal qualities, when they are called for, we make use of oral communication. So when we are not giving much importance to exactitude or being exact or being precise, when we are simply discussing something and bringing out new ideas through brainstorming, what we make use of is oral mode of communication. See, think of a company where a group discussion is happening, or during a meeting when people are coming up with new and noble ideas. See, in all such cases, no one writes things. People just speak out whatever is coming to their mind, whatever new idea, noble idea is coming to their minds. See, and then situations demanding maximum understanding. When situations demand maximum understanding, we make use of oral communication. See, if there is a misunderstanding between two people or two groups, if things are going utterly worse, what people do is people sit face to face and make amendments, they talk to each other, try to understand each other by sorting out the problems. So there also oral mode of communication is more beneficial during the case of misunderstandings. See, on occasions when people need to be open-minded, when there is just one-to-one communication between two people or two groups of people, what is most beneficial is oral mode of communication. For example, when there is a workers' strike in a company, see, without the help of intermediators, if the management directly talks to the workers, things can be solved easily and quickly. See, if you place intermediators in between, it might change or make the situation worse. So, an atmosphere of openness whenever it is desired. For example, to build up the fence between the management and the workers, we make use of what is called as oral communication. See, there are other situations also when oral communication is being made use of. You can read it in your textbook, it's there. Let us look at some of the situations where written mode is required or written mode of communication is more effective. See, where information has to be stored and retrieved, as I told you. See, in offices, in companies, if you need to keep a track record of things happening in the office, you necessarily need to store, and whenever need be, we need to retrieve those files or those decisions taken which are there in the official files. So written mode of communication is necessary in such conditions when information has to be stored and retrieved, as if in official records. And then the reliability and validity of an idea when it is of utmost importance, we make use of written communication, decisions taken by a group to be acted upon. See, we need to write down things, the decisions taken by a group of people, so that we can further act upon it. If an oral transaction is had, people will not keep that in mind, follow the actions, then they will not take the necessary actions. They will not act upon it if things are stated orally. See, reliable and, sorry, when the reliability and validity of an idea gets importance, and people have to act upon a particular decision taken by a group of people. In such cases, written communication is beneficial. So somebody asked to retrieve, what does it mean? Retrieve means, see, to get back. See, we can go back to the same file years and years later. അവിടെ നിന്ന് നമുക്ക് തിരിച്ചെടുക്കാൻ പറ്റും. ആ ഒരു കാര്യങ്ങൾ തിരിച്ചതിലേക്ക് നോക്കാൻ പറ്റും. അതിനെയാണ് റിട്രീവ് ചെയ്യാന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. See, and then object references, sorry, the verification and authentication of an idea when it is important. For example, the company, if it has taken a decision, or if the suggestions of the superior is recorded somewhere and people might have forgotten it, or people might have people might require it on another occasion. If such cases are there, what happens is written communication seems to be helpful. The verification and authentication of an idea when it gets importance, we need to make use of written communication. Objective references are important. See, for example, if we are writing a research article or an informative article, see, we have to store it, write it in a particular manner using the rules and regulations stated in the MLA handbook. So, objective references, we need to keep them as ready reference anytime during our research, the whole procedure of our research. So, objective references, when they are required, we make use of written communication. See, what written communication almost always does is it is supplementing or supporting oral communication. See, there is a tendency that people might forget, or people might, see, it might slip from their mind if some decision is taken during a meeting. So they can quickly go and look at the minutes of the meeting. They can quickly go and refer to the agenda of the meeting, what was it, and what were the decisions taken. They can think over it, or they can look at the register, which is kept as the minutes of a meeting, and they can find out whatever is forgotten or whatever has slipped their minds. See, and then when crucial decisions and actions are to be considered, written communication is helpful. For example, if we are talking about a particular institution where people keep changing, or the posts of people keep changing. See, for 3 years, one person might be the principal, and for the next 3 years, another person might be the principal. If such things are there, what are the plans and proposals made by the earlier principal? See, such things, if they are to be referred to, such crucial decisions regarding the organization, regarding the institution, if one has to refer back to, you need to have them in writing. So written mode is important there as well. See, communication is always subject to review and reconsideration. Communication is always subject to review and reconsideration. Example, goals, performance appraisals, etc. See, if you have a written form of our goals and our performance appraisals, we always will go back to it, and we can make amendments, improvements, modifications in our performances, and we can reach further near our goal through it. See, whatever is said during New Year resolutions, we almost always do not follow it. We just say it and we just forget it. But if we write it in a piece of paper and we always watch it or look at it, pasted somewhere in right in front of our eyes when we wake up, what happens is every day when we look at that resolution, some change, some kind of change comes in us, and we try to improve. We try to keep up with the resolution that we have taken. So, in case of reviewing of our subject and reconsideration of our resolutions, all such things, we need to have written mode. And then personal presence when it is not required or when it is not possible, we make use of written communications. We know these days we are all working at home. Still, we need to send some emails, we need to send some regards to our family and friends. We might be sending circulars to the officials in the company, our colleagues. So in all these cases, we do not have a personal presence, but still we need to communicate and we make use of written communication. So these are some of the occasions where written communication is made use of. And the third section talks about the cases or occasions when both these modes are used together. See, when people are expected to carry home ideas after a brainstorming session, individuals or team are asked to develop plans. See, for example, let's take example from the teaching learning scenario itself. If a teacher has given you an assignment or a project and she has told you, given you ample hints how to proceed, and she has been asking you certain ideas in order to add up to the points that she has discussed with you. So many of your friends might have come up with unique points, different points. So all these points have to be kept in mind, or either have to be written down so that you go home and work on that particular assignment or project. So this is one occasion when we make use of both the oral and the written communications. So first we bring out ideas, generate ideas from people around us, from the teacher, from the students around us, from our friends. And then we quickly write it down so that we do not forget it, and we go home and refer back to it. And when, see, follow-up activities are necessary. For example, there is a company and you have to follow up activities. Whatever decision is taken in the meeting, you have to work on that. On such occasions, again, both these oral and written communication, ways of communications are necessary. So there are other occasions when both these modes of communication are used. Many other examples are given in your textbook. You can just go through them. Now into the section on non-verbal communication. Actually, the second important subtopic in the third unit of block 1. Non-verbal communication, what is it? What are the different types of non-verbal communications? In which all occasions are they used? Non-verbal communication, just as the name suggests, it does not make use of words. It does not make use of words. Simply a smile, a frown, a silence delivers the meaning of it to the onlooker or to the person who is in front of you. See, non-verbal communication may be visual or auditory. See, it's quite nostalgic that we still remember the days when, see, the long bell rang in the schools. See, it was a moment when we rush for our homes, we rush for our vehicles so that we reach home as quickly as possible. So the ringing bell, the long bell that you hear at school, that is an example for an auditory non-verbal communication. Just the ringing of the bell communicates to you something, that the school is over. You are to go home after the amount of education that you have had that particular day. So that is being communicated through the ringing of the bell. See, and then visual symbols. See, visual non-verbal means of communications, which are the symbols, signs, eye contact, facial expression, body postures, gestures, and physical appearance. All these are visible non-verbal means of communication. See, if you give a whole lot of speech and you do not hear anyone clapping out it out for you, it is a sign, a kind of an indication. It communicates to you that like, you have not been up to the mark. So signs, symbols, etc. also tell us several things. They do communicate. See, all these things, signs, symbols, sounds, eye contact, facial expressions, all these contribute to what is called non-verbal means of communication. Even silence falls under this category. It is surprising to note that even silence falls under this category. We'll be looking at how it also becomes a part of non-verbal, a very important part of non-verbal communication, of course. See, we know the traffic signals. We are familiar with the traffic signals. We are familiar with the signboards, the symbols that we see at various places. See, in order to understand whether the toilet belongs to the gents or the ladies, there are signs posted, signboards posted there. Okay, to exit or to indicate that there are stairs in major national and international public places like airports, railway stations, etc. Signboards are kept. See, so these are not words. Communication is done only by means of pictures or signs or symbols. See, if you have watched a cricket match, what you find is the umpire, the cricket umpire, when he makes use of several gestures, to a cricket fan or a person who knows cricket, he understands it even without it being commented upon. Even without hearing the commentary, you come to know that a particular person is whether the cricketer or the person, the batsman, is out or not, whether the third umpire has been called for or not, whether the person has hit sixes or four. So all these things can be understood by the gestures of the umpire. So these are some of the occasions when signs, symbols, and gestures are made use of. And what are the advantages of non-verbal communication? Let us quickly get into that. Those who have just signed in, joined us, to them I'll remind you that we are in block 1, unit 3. Block 1, unit 3. If you're online, the page number is 45. The advantages of non-verbal communications we are into. See, the first one that they have enlisted here is the signs, how the signs are advantageous, or how through the means of signs things can be communicated quickly. The role of signals. See, if it is a junction and the traffic signal is placed, we can quickly make out that the red light stands for the stopping of the vehicle. We are very conscious of it and we need to follow the traffic rules. The danger signal of a skull with 2 cross bones communicates to us that it is a warning, it is danger, there is danger hidden there. Do not have to speak to another person or ask to another person why such a board is kept there. We already know that it means danger. So different colors, the colors that they signify, whatever they signify, the red flag on a rail by a railway guard or a green flag by a railway guard, it has different meanings. It clearly renders the message to the driver or the people on the platform. So nobody has to announce it. Everything is made clear of by making use of signs. Then we have symbols, the logos and the symbols, which see national symbols such as the Ashoka Chakra. All these symbols also communicate to us certain things. See, some of them are universal in nature, some of them are national in nature, some of them are owned by private companies. But all of these have one thing or the other to communicate, and they communicate without the help of words. They communicate to us certain ideas without the help of words. See, during meetings or during the maybe result analysis or such occasions, we make use of graphs, charts, and flow charts. See, such effective means of communications can be made use of if we are thinking of or if we are looking at the progress of a particular institution, if we are looking at the result of a particular educational institution. So you can make use of graphs in order to show the progress of a particular institution in terms of its results. So these things are also verbal means of communication, graphs, charts, and flow charts. The last section in this particular portion is body language and silence. See, our facial expressions, if two people are communicating to each other, standing very near to each other, our facial expressions do have to convey something. Our tone of voice has to convey something. Even our whole way of sitting or standing or bending does tell the speaker what is going on in our minds. See, a slight change, a slight shiver in our voice tells the listener that we are not that very confident or we are having some kind of tension. See, such are the variations in our tone, variations in our a tone, which tells people that we are either not confident or we are nervous. So these are visible quotes, facial expressions, the whole body posture. They are all the visible codes which tell people about the speaker, something or the other about the speaker. Eye contact is also important in this regard because eye contact, see, tells others about the speaker as well. When we want someone's attention, we say that we are trying to catch their eye. See, most of the time our eyes, if we are going to hide something from people, we do not normally look at their faces. We look down. So these are things, or these are slight, small ways in which we make use of our eyes in order to express our emotions. And they too convey something or the other to the onlooker. See, just a second, sister, I need a break of 5. I'll be coming in after 5 minutes, sister. Yes, hello. Sorry for the inconvenience. Actually, there has been a power failure and I did not have the laptop charged. Since I'm not able to get my textbooks from the center, I have to depend upon the laptop for the textbook itself. So now on eye communication or eye contact, see, when we are in a classroom, most often what teachers make use of or what teachers do is they do not focus on any particular individual or group in a classroom atmosphere. When they speak to students, they look at several people together. They keep moving their eyes from one person to another so that everyone is under fear. The teacher is looking at them and they start paying attention in the class. See, we do not make, teachers do not focus on a particular individual. And if someone does that, we know that we call it partiality. So eye contact is also important when it comes to communication, how our eyes tell people about us. If we keep maintaining eye contact with people, it shows our confidence. If while during a conversation, if we look down, it shows our shyness or our nervousness. While talking to people, if we close our eyes or if we raise our eyebrows, they mean different things. If we close our eyes, it means we have lack of interest. We do not have any interest in what the other person is saying. We close our eyes. And then the raising of the eyebrow shows surprise. If something is comes to us as a surprise, we express it by raising our eyebrows. At times we also widen our eyes out of surprise. So all these are different indications shown by our eye, and they do communicate certain ideas. And then we have body postures also, which are important in terms of communication. See, when someone is swinging one's legs or someone is resting the head backward in a reclining chair, someone is leaning backward. See, all these are indications of bad manners. If you are paying attention in the class, you need to be sitting straight or a bit bending forward, showing that you are paying attention to the speaker. So in order to show your attentiveness, you need to bend forward a little, keep your elbows at the side of the trunk of your body, and that posture of yours shows that you are listening attentively. See, there are also importance given to distance during communication. You see, if we are very, very close friends, to show our intimacy, we do not have much space between us. Intimate space is the closest bubble of space surrounding a person. That means only our closest friends and relatives, siblings come under this intimate space. Entry into this space is acceptable only for the closest friends and intimates. There is also something called the social space or the consultative space. So it is the most comfortable space for two people who are not much acquainted to each other, for strangers. The space in which people feel comfortable conducting routine social interactions. If people are having a conversation, two strangers are having a conversation, they keep at a particular distance, and that is called the social space or the consultative space. From which a gap between two people from which we feel more comfortable talking to each other. And there is something called the public space, the area of space beyond which people will perceive interactions as impersonal and relatively anonymous. The area of space beyond which people will perceive interactions as impersonal. See, something which is spoken to not just the people, the person quite near to him, to all the people around. So it doesn't have a personal touch. Their interactions are going beyond personal or impersonal. Is there a problem in clarity? Okay, I'll try to make it better. So physical distance also plays an important role in communication, just as eye contact and facial expressions. Now into the next subheading, which is silence, which is of utmost importance. See, we often say that silence is actually something which indicates agreement. If during a discussion, if someone keeps silent, it indicates that he is in agreement with whatever the decision is taken. So silence may be sometimes wrongly understood. It can be misinterpreted, misunderstood. So silence is a powerful medium of communication. It has a dramatic impact. See, most often it is something which is misunderstood. See, it could be effectively used to express one's protest. It can also provoke introspection in speakers as well as listeners. See, if someone keeps silence for a long time, it may lead to the speaker's introspection. The speaker looks into himself or thinks about whatever he has said, whether it was something wrong or it was something not welcome. So it leads to introspection if someone keeps silent while you are talking. So silence can have a dramatic effect on in presentations and speeches in order to draw the attention of everyone. See, for example, in a class which is noisy, the teacher starts speaking and there is no one who is actually listening. Maybe it may be because of the unfavorable weather conditions. It may be because they are all disturbed of something else. But once the teacher goes silent for a while, all of them listen to the teacher, all of them come back and pay attention to the teacher. So it has a dramatic effect during speeches and presentations, during lectures as well. So those who are chatting, they become quiet, they become attentive. See, when someone is very emotional, it is desirable to make silence until he or she lets out all the steam. So if there is a situation where a kind of a row is going on, it is better to keep silence than just utter out quite disturbing or troublesome comments. See, when someone is emotional, he should not just emotionally burst out. It is best that he keeps silent. So silence has its own role in the lives of people and in the field of communication as well. The silence can be regarded as appropriate or inappropriate depending upon the situation. See, when the demands of the workers is found to be unrealistic, what the management does is it keeps a stoic silence. When the management keeps a stoic silence, what happens is the demands of the workers are brought to a minimum. So they scale down, they are forced to scale down their demands. They are forced to scale down their demands if the management keeps a stoic silence during the unrealistic demands of the workers. See, we have many people who are famous for their silences. Mrs. Indira Gandhi, she is said to be famous for her silences at high-level meetings. During high-level meetings, she would be silent, and her silence does express her opinion on such occasions. The Japanese people, they are also said to use silence very effectively. So you need to know when to raise your voice and when to be silent. And silence has different ideas to convey to the listener. So this is about silence, and now into barriers to communications. We have already discussed it in a vague manner. We are going to discuss it further. Barriers are nothing but the hindrances or the things which come in way of effective communication. It can be of different types. We are into 3.5, subunit 3.5, barriers to communication. See, barriers are something which comes in between the communicator and the receiver, which hinders the progress of the communication, which hinders the smooth going of the communication. They may be of different types. Broadly, they are categorized into semantic and linguistic barriers, socio-psychological barriers, cross-cultural barriers. See, semantic and linguistic barriers. The first example of semantic and linguistic barriers is ambiguity in expression. What do you mean by ambiguity? Ambiguity is the vagueness in terms of meaning. Every language has words that sound the same but have different meanings, or words that sound or look very similar but are different in meaning. So ambiguity can rise because of such words or expressions. It may be intentional or unintentional. Intentional use of words which are similar in sound are made by poets and writers and is known as pun. Words which sound similar, intentionally they are used as part of poetry or any write-up in order to create ambiguity. See, for example, here is an example given. Look at this example. They can fish here. They can fish here. If the word can, if the word can is a noun, what does it mean? People store fish in cans in this particular part of the place. They can fish here. That is, fish is put into cans, fish is packed into cans. But if the word fish is taken as a verb and can is taken as an auxiliary, modal auxiliary, what does it mean? See, it means that this place is, people permit fishing here. This place is suitable for fishing. So ambiguity can arise in such situations when words fall under two different categories. See, can used as a noun standing for a container, and can used as an auxiliary verb. Can, in such situations, it does create ambiguity or what is called as vagueness in terms of meaning. What is the actual intention of the speaker is not clear in such cases. So ambiguity can cause what is called hindrance. It can be a barrier to communications. Homophones also I told you about. Then contextual meaning and speech acts. See, words have contextual meanings according to the context in which particular words are spoken, they do mean differently. Language is used to perform a speech act, such as give an order, extend an invitation, and so on. Thus, the sentence, Ram, the door is open. If someone says, Ram, the door is open, if they are talking in terms of the opportunities available to this person called Ram, what does it mean? He is welcome into their company or their institution. Ram, the door is open might mean that he has an opportunity to work with them. So he is getting an invitation, a welcome from the part of the management or the company. If someone says Ram, the door is open as a command. What does it mean? It means that the door is open and it has to be closed. Why don't you close the door? See, if in the midst of a fight, a verbal fight, someone says, Ram, the door is open. What does it mean? It is time for you to leave. As a dismissal, someone is asking him to leave right then. See, Ram, the door is open in the midst of a verbal fight. If people are arguing with each other, and Ram is the most disturbing of all the uh, members who are taking part in this verbal fight. And if someone says, Ram, the door is open, what does it mean? It means that the person to leave is none other than Ram. You can leave, is what the meaning of this particular sentence is in such a context, when it is uttered in such a context. So context has necessarily a role when it comes to communication. So contextual meaning has importance. Stress and intonation I have already told you about. There is register and jargon acronyms. See, register and jargon acronym. What is meant by register? See, register is nothing but according to the field of action or according to the profession that we are into, the words that are regularly used in that particular field of action or profession, that becomes the register of that particular field, medical register, legal register. So if somebody is working in the law field, most often what he makes use of is the legal register. That means he makes use of words like say court, or maybe all the different maybe the respondent, petitioner, all such words can be heard from a person who is working in the field of law, legal jargon or legal register it is called. See, in certain fields, certain words have a special meaning. Those not from the field may not know that register or particular meaning of that particular word, and this may lead to what is known as barrier in communication. So that is what is talked about in this particular section. See, jargons are nothing but sets of words specific to a department. See, legal jargon, sports jargon, trade jargon, and political jargon, etc. See, people belonging to the business field, they might know many of the words related to the stock market, the ups and downs in the stock market, the inclination, declination, all such things they might be aware of. So what happens is, if someone is not familiar to such jargons and registers, communication fails, and thus these things become a barrier. We also have acronyms, which sometimes becomes a barrier if it is not known, or if it is not clear. The acronyms are words made by putting together the initial letters of a descriptive name. They are usually understood only within their context. STD, PAN or PIN or NGO are common acronyms in India. See, in America, the PIN code is known as the zip code. So if someone goes to America and he talks about the PIN code, it is not possible for people to understand him. So that becomes there, the communication undergoes a break because of the barrier of such an acronym, which is not in their particular language. See, and then socio-psychological barriers, what are they? See, you have been listening to me for quite a long time now. See, most of the time what people say is one can only listen to a person for a few minutes. An attention span of a person is only a few minutes. The rest is just that we are hearing, but we do not incorporate it, or we do not include it into our minds. So that psychological barrier, that can be called as psychological barrier. The attention span of the listener can sometimes be a psychological barrier, and communication might go incomplete. See, and then external differences and disturbances and wrong medium. See, during communication, if there is some kind of a variation in terms of the signal, communication does not happen smoothly, and such noises or such break in signal can be regarded as external disturbance. See, sometimes what happens is the medium that we chose might go wrong, and then communication does not take place properly. So instead of the visual symbols, if someone tries to communicate it through pie diagrams or through bar graphs, most often the intention of the communicator might not be encoded by the listener or by the onlooker. So medium, if not selected properly, communication might be having a break. And then personal bias and strong feelings. There might be issues between the reader and the listener and the speaker. They might be having strong emotional bias. So when such things happen, people do not often listen carefully to the speaker, and communication might be hindered. See, and then communication might also be disturbed if someone has an attitude like, I see only what I want. The speaker might be saying several things, but the listener might not be taking in all those things. He only listens to the part that he is interested in. If such things happen, it also comes up as a barrier to communication. See, cynicism and negativity also comes in the way of communication. That means it hinders communication. See, somebody who is not open to new ideas might stop the communication then and there. It might break the communication between two people or two groups. See, and then perceived benefits. For good two-way communication, we need an attentive and an interested audience. If someone who is not that interested, if they do not perceive any benefit into that communication, might get lost, or communication might not turn that beneficial. So these are some of the things which are known as barriers to communication. So this is the end of block 1. We are moving on to block 2 now. If you have your textbooks, we are moving on to, actually let us skip block 2 and move on to block 3 as I told you in the last class. Block 3 we are into. We'll be discussing block 2 last maybe tomorrow, because reading and writing skills is more important than speaking and listening when it comes to your exam. See, the first part is on reading, the reading skill, and then comes the writing part. First, we'll discuss the reading skill. See, why do people read? People read because it's a primary skill and it is necessary to master a language. It's necessary to master a language. It's a primary skill which is necessary to know a language, to master a language. People read in many different ways. Sometimes people may read to collect information. Sometimes people may read simply to gain pressure out of it. So reading is of different types. See, there is something called loud reading and there is something called silent reading. See, in page number 7 of your textbook, the reading process. What does reading mean? Or how do we read? See, reading involves looking into a text and saying the word to yourself. So if you are reading it silently, what you do is you say words to yourself. Reading also involves putting the words in print on the page into sentences and making sense of them. See, sometimes we read things and whatever we have gained out of it, whatever meaning we have gained out of it, we write it down. So that is also, reading is also meant for that. To understand a word, you have to read all the letters in it. To understand a sentence, you have to read all the words in it. So these are the, page number is 7. These are the different ways in which reading can be helpful. See, sometimes if a text is not available in a classroom, the teacher may ask the people to read the text aloud. So that might be beneficial to all other students in the class, those who do not have a text. See, if we really want to develop reading skills in a second language or a foreign language, we necessarily need to understand that we have to become efficient readers. Reading is necessarily of two types. See, two separate activities are happening while reading. One is reading for meaning and reading aloud. See, when we read for meaning, we look at each and every word specifically and we try to find out the meaning hidden in the given word or line. But when we read aloud, we may not be concentrating upon the meaning aspect of the sentence. We are simply reading because we are to be heard. Reading for meaning is an activity we normally engage in when we read books, when we read newspapers, when we read road signs, etc. So from there, we necessarily have to grasp some meaning out of it, which is useful to us. But reading aloud is not just to understand a text, but to convey the information to a second person. Reading aloud most often, as I told you, in a classroom, if someone reads aloud, it is for the benefit of the other people who do not have a text. So it is not for the benefit of the person who reads, but it is for the benefit of some other people. Information is being conveyed to some other people as well. So that section discusses how reading can be done in two ways. One is reading aloud and another is reading for meaning. So reading, as we saw, it's not a very passive process. It's an active process. Something is at work when we read. On what is this something? We are actually encoding the meaning, decoding the meaning of the sender or the speaker or the writer. When we read, what is the writer? Whatever the writer means or intends to tell us, we decode the text, the written or the spoken text. So reading is not at all a passive process, it's an active process. There is a discussion on what are the strategies used by good readers. As far as your exam is concerned, that part is not that important. See, and then into the section on levels of meaning, page number 16, levels of meaning. See, there may be different levels of meaning. 4 highly interrelated and overlapping levels of meaning are identified out here, which are the literal, the interpretative, the critical, and the creative. What do you mean by literal meaning? Literal meaning is meaning that we find in dictionaries. See, literal comprehension involves the reader in understanding the information stated directly in a text. That information may be facts and details, sequence of events, main ideas and generalizations, causes and effects. See, the key element in comprehension at this level is that the information is present in black and white in the text. So we are not looking for meanings outside the text. We are just looking at the words on paper and we are trying to find out the meanings of the words given there. Sometimes we may make use of a dictionary, or sometimes we already know, we are familiar with the words and we do not have to make use of a dictionary. So whatever the words are given, we take the meanings of the words as such. This is called literal meaning. We do not dig deeper into it. We do not have a profound thought over it and we try to understand a deeper aspect of the meaning of the word. We simply look at the word, we understand its meaning, and that's over. See, that is literal meaning. See, and then interpretative. See, interpretative is to read between the lines. To read at the interpretative meaning, or on the other hand, it is to read between the lines. That means whatever is stated might not be the real intention of the speaker. So the real intention of the speaker, whatever he has intended to say, he might have hidden it between the lines. So finding out that is what is called interpretative meaning. So such a meaning which is hidden in between the lines is called as interpretative meaning, interpretative level of meaning. Most often, writers make use of this interpretative meaning. Writers, they do not state all the facts directly. Their emotions, attitudes, and suggestions, they just imply it. And the reader has to read between the lines and find out the implication or the intention of the writer. The person who is who knows the writer well, or who is familiar with the style of the writer, quickly gets into the meaning between the lines. So he's familiar with a person who is familiar with a particular writer's style, can easily understand his kind of paragraphs and sentences. See, we are in page number 17, the third block. Somebody is asking page number. See, when someone says he has no heart, does it mean that he does not have an organ inside him which is called heart? It doesn't mean that. It means that he is someone who is ruthless, who is unkind. So, such is the meaning, interpretative meaning. When someone says he has no heart, it doesn't mean that the person does not have a heart. He does not have an organ called the heart which beats. But it means that he is ruthless, he is unkind. So, this is the interpretative level of meaning. And then we have the critical level of meaning, wherein, see, we need to make judgments with regard to the text. When we review novels or when we make reviews of newspaper articles, what happens is there we make use of what is called as critical reading. Critical reading requires making judgments with regard to a text. The reader may judge the accuracy of the facts, the validity of the conclusions drawn, or effectiveness of the author's style. So there we actually criticize the author's style, or we might disagree with whatever the author has stated, the person has stated. So in all these different ways, we critically analyze the text. So this is one way of finding out the critical level of meaning. Critical reading is meant for that. See, and then critical reading also requires giving reasons for the judgment. Simply saying that this particular novel is worth nothing, that might not do. So if you are saying that this novel is good for nothing, or this novel it does not have a content, it does not have a uh, valid theme, if you are raising such criticisms against a particular text, if you are making judgments, you necessarily have to state the reason. So critical reading requires giving reasons for the judgment and stating the criteria used in making it. So which is the criteria based on which you are making such a comment. See, and then creative reading. What does it mean? Creative reading calls for generation of ideas, new ideas and insights. See, after reading a particular text, see, if you are working, if you are a researcher, if you are working on a particular topic, if you are doing your research, what you do is you look in for generation of new ideas from the given text. So it is creative reading. Generation of new ideas. New ideas are created. We work on an application level. We look at the text from various approaches. പല പല വ്യൂ പോയിന്റ്സിലാണ് നമ്മൾ ആ ടെക്സ്റ്റിനെ എന്ത് ചെയ്യുന്നത്, നോക്കി കാണുന്നത്. അതിലൂടെ അനലൈസ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് മീനിങ്ങിനെ സിന്തസൈസ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് നമ്മൾക്ക് വേണ്ട രീതിയിൽ നമ്മൾ ആ ന്യൂസിനെ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ആ ഒരു ന്യൂ ഐഡിയയെ നമ്മൾ എന്ത് ചെയ്യുന്നു, വി മേക്ക് യൂസ് ഓഫ് ഇറ്റ് ക്രിയേറ്റീവ്ലി ആസ് we require it. So sometimes it happens that, see, proposing an alternative conclusion or generalization based on the reading text and suggestions, related examples or exercises in creative reading. Sometimes it happens that the students are given clues to a particular story and they are asked to write down the whole story. See, certain clues are given, hyphenated expressions are given, names of some characters are given, names of some incidents are given, and they are asked to complete the whole story. So such kind of a work or activity is known as creative reading, taking reading to a creative level. So these are the 4 levels of meanings or comprehension. Then there is a discussion on faulty practices in reading. As far as your exam is concerned, this part does not hold much importance. Do not come across a question from this particular part as yet. So that unit is over, unit 1. Then moving on to what is known as vocabulary development. Block 3, unit 2, vocabulary development. See, we have something called the active vocabulary and the passive vocabulary. The active vocabulary is the limited amount of words that we have with us that we constantly make use of. But passive vocabulary is the umpteen number of words that we have with us, that we have been keeping inside us without expressing. See, maybe because we are not confident enough to use them during our conversations, maybe because we tend to forget things. So it remains there passively inside us. So it's not that we do not know the word, but we do not make use of those words actively. So such vocabulary is passive vocabulary. Active vocabulary is the limited, comparatively smaller to passive vocabulary. It is the limited amount of words that we most often make use of while having a communication. I think we have spoken about what is called content word and structure word, function word. Function word is also known as structure word. Content words are nouns, main verbs, adverbs, and adjectives. Nouns, adjectives, verbs, and main verbs and adverbs are known as the content verbs. Content words. Function words are words which help in the building of the grammatical structure. Building of the grammatical structure. Words like prepositions, conjunctions, auxiliary verbs, all these words are known as the structure words or the function words because they help construct the grammatical structure. Function words, they are smaller in number because they are limited. They do not have an open entry into their list. They are closed system. They are a closed system, closed class system. They are also known as closed class system because they do not permit new entries. The number of structure words or is limited. But when we think of nouns, adjectives, adverbs, and main verbs, what happens is the list is unending. The list doesn't end at all. New entries are often made into them. And then what are the difficulties? This part actually comes in as question. 2.4, some difficulties in learning English vocabulary. See these homonyms, homographs, homophones. This I have seen 1 or 2 times in your question paper. One word having many meanings. We have already discussed these things. Homonyms are words which look similar, which have similar pronunciation, but have different meaning in different contexts. So when context changes, these words carry different meanings. Otherwise, they look alike and they are pronounced alike. See, the word club has different meanings here. Local club in your colony means a place where, a public place where people used to gather, association of people with common interest. But when you talk of, if you're talking of Mahabharata and Bhima, and you're talking of a club, it means the club that Bhima holds in his hand. A heavy stick with a thick end, which he holds in his hand. If you're talking of a pack of cards, club is one of the four suits in a conventional pack of cards. See, sometimes we talk of clubbing up ideas or clubbing up institutions. So clubbing here means combining. So the word club has several different meanings in different contexts. Another example of bed is given: bed of roses, bed of rice, bed of pansies. Different meanings arise out of the word bed in different contexts. So homophones and homonyms, all these are different sets of words in English, which makes it difficult for us to learn the vocabulary of this foreign language. So some of the ideas or some of the concepts which make our learning of this foreign language difficult. See, when we use the same word as a verb and as another part of speech, we call it a homograph. Homograph. The spelling remains the same, but the words belong to two different classes. Same form, different sound and different meaning. See, same form, different sound and different meaning, homographs. There is an example. Actually, two examples are given. The director's secretary took out the minutes. Every minute, every minute details are taken care of by a diligent organizer. See, though the word looks similar, it is spelled similarly, it does have different pronunciation. It has the same form, but different pronunciation and meaning. The first word is minutes and the second is minute. In the second sentence, in the third sentence, actually, warriors in earlier days fought with bows and arrows. In the second sentence, with the word BOW in it, we bow our head to the martyrs of our freedom movement. So one is bows and the other is bow. Bowing our head, actually bending down our head in order to show respect. So words having similar form but different sound and meaning are called homographs. So homophones, homographs and homonyms, these terms appear in your question paper. What are they? Give examples. How do they hinder communication or how do they hinder the learning of vocabulary? Such questions are seen in your question paper. Yet another set of words is known as hyponyms. See, hyponyms are categories of words which include other subcategories. For example, the orange is a fruit, apple is also a fruit, but the word fruit is a superordinate. That means all these, see, the names of fruits, they can be included under the bigger category, superordinate category, which is known as the fruits. So superordinate category is fruits and the hyponyms are orange, banana, grapes, apple, etc. So all these terms, individual fruits fall into the single category of the superordinate category of what is called the fruits. In a similar way, we have red, yellow, blue, etc., which fall under the superordinate category called the colors. So under the superordinate character category of colors, the other things that we find, blue, red, white, black, etc., they are known as the hyponyms. So sometimes they may ask you what are hyponyms, what are homographs or homonyms, etc. Synonyms and antonyms we are familiar with. Antonyms are opposites and synonyms are words with similar meanings. See, another idea which makes it difficult for us to learn the vocabulary of English is the idea of word formation or word building. The word building through affixation and compounding. Affixation is adding suffix or prefix to a word, and compounding is nothing but putting two meaningful words together in order to create a word with a totally different meaning. Combining two words having two content words having different meanings in order to form a different meaning altogether. That is what compounding means. For example, we have a word like brainstorm. Storm is something quite different and brain is something different. But when it comes to brainstorming, it means a totally different concept. Brainstorming of ideas means a totally different concept. So compound words are made out of two or more words which can exist independently as separate words. So flower pot, armchair, blackboard are other examples given in your textbook. So that is the end of that particular section, unit. So now into the last part or the last unit in block 3. Remember, we have to complete unit 2 that we'll be discussing tomorrow. But today, let us wind up by discussing this particular unit, unit 3. Yes, it is very important because from this letter writing, formal letter writing comes most often. That appears in your question paper, unit 3. They also ask you the different methods of writing as well, how to organize your writing, all such things are asked as paragraph questions. So in this particular unit, the most important idea is that of the methods of writing. The section is 3.2, methods of writing. Writing is a three-way process: pre-writing, writing, and rewriting. So what might be pre-writing? Pre-writing is the planning or the brainstorming that takes place even before we write. So writing is taken up as a linear process which works in a step-by-step fashion, where three processes are involved. The first is pre-writing, the second is writing, and the third is rewriting. So the section on planning, trying to collect information, jotting down points, brainstorming in order to combine these ideas into a whole thing comes under pre-writing. And then there is the actual part of writing, preparing the first draft. And what might be rewriting. See, we cannot always sit up with the first draft that we have and say that it is perfect in itself. So we need to rewrite things. We might have brought in ideas from different sources. We might have written them all down, but we might not have organized it. So this organization comes when we rewrite things. So it is about the three stages or the three acts in writing, the three methods in writing, three-way process writing is called. And what are the key elements? When we write, we need to have three elements in mind. One is the purpose of writing. Why are we writing? If you are writing an exam, we necessarily are writing in order to gain marks. So our answers need to be unique. Our answers need to be totally different from the person sitting next to me, because what happens is I need to score more marks. It's a healthy competition going. I need to write better so that I score more marks. So one purpose of writing exams is to score marks. Another is to learn things as you grow. In order to, it's a proof that you have learned something. While when you write an exam, it's a proof that you have crossed one particular stage in your life. See, purpose of writing is important. Subject matter of writing is important. Keeping in mind the reader or the audience also important while writing. So whom am I writing for? Who is the targeted reader? So that is so important. So while writing, we need to ask these questions to ourselves. Why am I writing this piece? What is the purpose of writing this? For whom am I writing this? And what is the source, the best available source which I can make use of while writing? So if you are writing something, you necessarily need to have a subject. See, if you are writing an assignment, your teacher gives you the subject of the seminar or the assignment, and you necessarily have to focus on that alone. Topics related to that alone, you necessarily have to focus on that alone. You do not have to deviate from the thoughts. You do not have to brood over what is it that I'm going to write or what is the subject that I'm going to choose. So such deviations are not there when we already have been assigned a topic by our teacher. And then gathering information. How do we gather information? We gather information by brainstorming. One method of gathering information is brainstorming. While researching, what we make use is we make use of highlighters to indicate the material that we will need to use for our writing. So while reading a newspaper, if I'm doing a research on a particular topic, whatever comes in front of my eyes, or whatever I read through, if I find something related to my topic of research, what I do is I mark it, I highlight it using the highlighters to indicate that it is important for me when I write. So this is one way of collecting information. See, sometimes I may make notes whenever I hear a lecture on a topic related to my research subject. What I do is I jot down points, I make notes, and then I further read about it. And then brainstorming, as I told you, is another way of collecting information. What we do there is the ideas that has entered our brain, we sort it out, we find out which is important to us, which is related to our project or assignment or research. So such a activity is known as brainstorming. It's a productive method of generating ideas, facts, and opinion very quickly. So finding out what is useful, what is of quality, or what is beneficial to a particular person who is doing a research or an assignment on a particular topic. See, and then this session, brainstorming, the session of brainstorming can also be called as planning session, wherein we track down our ideas and information we have gathered by making a list of it. See, another technique is by making use of an issue tree or a mind map. See, in an issue tree, what we make use of is we make use of WH questions and we try to answer them. So what is the purpose of writing is important. What is the actual purpose of my indulging in writing is important, as I told you earlier. Then knowing your reader is also important. See, unless you know your reader, unless you know that your reader is well versed in this particular area, you might be providing him the stale kind of information that he already knows. So you are not giving him anything to work upon, or you are not giving him anything to think anew. പുതുതായിട്ട് ചിന്തിക്കാൻ ഒന്നും തന്നെ നിങ്ങൾ വായനക്കാരന് നൽകുന്നില്ല. See, already if a person is aware of certain aspects of a particular topic, if the same person is given the same ideas again, he will get bored, and so it is not beneficial to the reader, it's not beneficial to the writer also. So you need to have a knowledge of the reader, the targeted reader. We do not know who are going to read the articles that I have written or any other person has written, but we need to keep always the audience or the reader in mind while we write. See, an information which is completely new should be provided with much explanation and a great clarity. The second part is actually of the process of writing. Writing the thesis statement, beginning to write. 3.3 is the subtopic, page number 46, beginning to write. See, while we begin to write, the first thing that we have to do is to bring in the thesis statement. Thesis statement is actually declaring the main point or the focus of your writing task, the controlling idea of your writing task. See, if someone says the university requires smart boards urgently if education has to be delivered in a modern way, what happens? Such a working thesis states an opinion about the subject and suggests that the report or the memos shall do. See, if such a statement is given in a classroom, it may lead to a debate. People can argue for it or argue against it. See, allow such a statement to work for you as you move from pre-writing stage to your various drafts and revisions. So this is the first step in writing, actually writing the thesis statement. Whatever you are going to write upon, you are going to focus upon, that has to be stated right at the beginning. See, if you have a good thesis statement, it clearly states the writer's opinion on a particular topic. It generally asserts one main idea. You should not be wavering in different ideas. You should be focusing on one main idea or subject or theme. And it has to be stated specifically. In very specific terms, you have to mention the thesis statement. See, when you write a paragraph, what are the things that you have to keep in mind is the next important topic given there. How do you write a topic? See, a topic, a paragraph is a piece of writing which is unified by a central controlling idea or theme. The idea or theme is called the topic of the paragraph. There will be a topic sentence. There will be a beginning, a middle, and a proper, appropriate end to it. So, topic sentence is important in a paragraph. Topic sentence very clearly states what is the focus of attention in that particular paragraph. What is it? What does the paragraph talk about? So if you have a topic sentence very clearly stated in specific terms, what happens is both the reader and the writer get the idea of what the paragraph is all about. So you need to have a topic statement. You need to have elaboration of the topic statement next. If you are going to explain things better, you can make use of illustrations. And there should be a summing up or a concluding statement. So this is one way how you write a good paragraph. See, while writing, you need to make use of sentences, very good sentences, which introduces and concludes your write-up. The statements at the beginning of an article is known as the introductory statement, the introduction part, and how you conclude your paragraph or statement is also important. The various ways in which one begins a write-up is given there. One can make use of an analogy or a comparison. One can make use of a question. A very famous quotation from a well-known personality can be made use of. One can make use of a proverb, a relevant story, an anecdote, a joke. So these are different possibilities for an introduction to any write-up. See, also a good piece of writing needs a satisfactory conclusion. It has to be the subject, the discussion on the subject is actually covered or is complete, has to be shown through the conclusion statement. So sometimes we restate the thesis statement. Sometimes again we make use of rhetorical questions that makes readers think about the writer's main points or so. Sometimes we make evaluation of the importance of the subject in the current scenario. Sometimes we call for action. See, I have stated all these different ideas, and the authorities have to be necessarily taking action regarding it. In the paragraph or write-up and a quotation from an authority can be included as a conclusion. So these are the different ways in which you conclude your write-up. See, and then organizing your writing is also necessary. See, I told you that there are three methods of writing: pre-writing, writing, and the third one was actually organizing. Pre-writing, writing, and how did they title the third one? I forgot. Just a second. Yes, rewrite. Yes, rewrite. Rewrite is what organizing means. I've already told you that, but I just forgot the exact word that they use, rewriting. See, whatever we have written, we actually organize. We might have got points, got ideas from various sources. We might have jotted them all down, even without having any priority basis. So While you organize your writing, it is known as rewriting. The first draft maybe have to written again and again, second draft, third draft, fourth draft has to be made in order to make your write-up an organized one, wherein a cohesion of ideas should be there. From a writer's point of view, organizing involves searching for a pattern or a sequence. The one idea should lead to another. That sequence should be followed. So the relationship between the concepts or the paragraphs written should be maintained, organized well. So that comes as a part of rewriting. And then we have different forms of discourse. See, actually, what are the different ways in which we make use of writing is what is meant discourse. See, forms of discourse, generally exposition, narration, description, and argumentation are considered to be the basic forms of discourse. Expository discourse means nothing but, see, grouping, classification, definition, illustration, giving instructions and directions, advice, processes, and systems. See, all these are known as the expository. They come under the expository discourse. See, for example, if you are talking about the working of a particular machine, if you are illustrating the working of a particular equipment, if you are giving instructions with regard to the preparation of a particular recipe, if you are giving directions to your friend to reach your home safely, all these come under expository discourse. See, and then the second one is narrative discourse. In narrative discourse, we really need to have a skilled narrator who arranges everything. See, a skilled narrator is able to arrange the details in such a way that the reader's interest rises to a climax at a point in the narration. So narration is nothing but storytelling, actually telling things in a chronological order. See, actions are to be placed in a chronological order and you are stating all the things necessarily with regard to the action in a chronological manner or order. Yes, these discourses are important. Somebody is asking if discourses are important. Yes, discourses are important. See, narrative discourse we most often come across when we look at short stories, when we look at novels, when we go through a movie, when we watch a movie, narrative discourses can be seen. See, sometimes people vary from the chronological order using the process of flashback. See, in movies, in books, see, the first chapter of the novel might be the happy ending of the novel. And then the whole story of the protagonists might be told to you in terms of flashbacks. So such changing of chronological order might also take place while having a narrative discourse. And then there is descriptive discourse. In descriptive discourse, see, scenes, whatever we have been through, whatever, see, if you have seen an accident, if you have seen a particular incident, or if you are making a picture, all those things are described one after the other. All the steps in the making, whatever you had witnessed, everything is described one after the other. So much detailing is needed in terms of descriptive discourse. You need to have very minute and keen observations while you indulge in descriptive discourse. Descriptive discourse. And there is something called argumentative discourse, where we have to look at a particular idea for its pros and cons. See, there may be people who may be favoring the argument, there may be people who are against the argument. So an idea which is open and which gives importance to both these agreements and disagreements. Such discourses are open to agreement, and such discourses are called argumentative discourses. See, an opponent will be there, a person who is favoring the argument will be there. So such, in argumentative discourses, the writer argues a case, expresses an opinion by looking at a problem from both sides. Any structure representing argumentation must take into account the pro and con nature of the argument. So അതിന്റെ മെറിറ്റ്സും ഡിമെറിറ്റ്സും അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അതിന്റെ എന്താണ് the advantages and disadvantages. See, you have to look at both the sides of the coin or the argument. That is called argumentative discourse. So that is the end of that particular section. This last part is very important. I'll begin tomorrow's class from that particular section, and then we'll move on to block 2. So I think we can wind up our class for today. Sister?